ready.
Art impression.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Green City Council meeting. Today is March 26, 2019. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Babbitt.
Here.
Mr. Dyer. Mr. Humphrey.
Here.
Mr. Shaughnessy.
Here.
Mr. Spate.
Here.
Mr. Yergin.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here. Before I get to our next item, I would just like to welcome back our clerk. Molly's been out for a month, and it's good to have her back here where she belongs. So welcome back, Molly. Very good. Okay, the next thing we have is the approval of the March 12th, 2019 regular meeting minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second for the approval of the March 12th, 2019 regular meeting minute rules. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is public report. This is an opportunity for someone here who would like to address council. You're more than welcome to come up to the microphone and say anything you like. We'd like you to keep your comments to about 3 minutes. And with that, I don't have the sheet in front of me.
Oh, shoot.
It's all right.
Well, I can't expect me to remember everything.
We've got a sheet of, it's her first night back. Do we have anyone signed in?
Yeah.
Oh, gee. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Humphrey. Okay, the first person signed in this evening is Brent Kuwatch.
Hi. Brent Kuwatch, 5706 Buck Trail, Clinton, Ohio. I was just coming to speak on behalf of the Fire Station Number 4. I saw there's legislation,
Sorry.
Thank
You
you,
know, I
Brent.
gotta get back in the swing of things.
and the emergency response times, I appreciate council considering this because of the emergency response times. You know, I'm a taxpayer just like everybody else, and, you know, I feel that I deserve the same response time as anybody else in the city. And I don't think that we need the station number 4 because of the pipeline coming through there, simply because there's so many pipelines already. It's more because the pipeline presented an opportunity for us to do something about fire station number 3 and 4, which were two things that seem to have been kicked down the road for better than a decade. So it's kind of like make lemonade if you're served up lemons. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Mr. Kuwatch. The next person we have signed in is Gary McGaffey. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Gary McAfee. I live at 602 Stoner Road in Green. I have a business also in Green. It's been there 30 years, and it's located at 1717 Bettler Road, which is just right down the street. I have a new bank they built specifically for me, right next to me. Yeah, I wish, huh? I currently have 35 employees. Some live in Green, but all of them pay Green taxes. I'm here tonight to ask for the new fire and rescue station number 4 to be built closer to my home. I have had the rescue squad to my shop several times. All were within 5 minutes, which it should be because it's right here. Arrival time, and the paramedics were very knowledgeable and professional. It's hard to believe, but I'm approaching my senior years. And the thought of taking twice as long to get to my house than my company for an emergency worries me. In my business, there are three things you look at before proceeding to purchase a new building or equipment. Number one, do we need it? Number two, how can we finance it? And number three was, where will we locate it? It looks like to me we have 1 and 2 answered. The only answer I have now is the vote for number 3. I look forward for your favorable vote. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gary. The next person we have signed in is Joan Kleinbrink. Kleinbrink? I'm typically good for that. Just give me a,
making my husband come up with me, but
That's
he's
good.
not gonna talk.
we appreciate his support.
I always do what she says.
I'm not sure that he wants to.
I'm kidding. I'm Randy.
Anyway, Joan and Randy Kreinbrink, 649 Stoner Road in Clinton. We heard the fire chief last meeting tell us that location placement of fire departments is focused right now on areas of higher population density. I feel this Nexus money should go first to making sure response time and safety is a priority for all green taxpayers before and above all other ideas for allocation, i.e. parks, buildings, and other considerations. The first priority of any city government should be the safety of all of its citizens, no matter where they live. We are all taxpayers and shouldn't have to ask, but we should expect the same response time. On another note, not much has been said at the last meeting about the blast zone disaster or a blast zone disaster, but we live near that zone. We live near Comet Lake. So we would appreciate a quick response rate or time, and Nexus money should directly fund this unlikely but possible disaster and the response time if it occurs. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, Joan and Randy, for your comments. All right, next we have Jim and Cheryl Feltner.
Good evening. Also coming up as couples here. Jim and Cheryl Fellner, we live on 6030 Northeast Drive, been here about 6 years. I just want to strongly, again, urge your consideration for funding Station 4. I know that we had a very good conversation 2 weeks ago. I know that several of you acknowledged that you heard us. I just feel like this is a very golden opportunity where we do have funds to be able to go ahead and address the issue that we feel in terms of response time. I do feel like we'll never win the war if we're just measuring the number of calls that are made in a certain area, because we do live in an isolated area. As people have said before us, we do pay our taxes, we do expect the same response time, and this is a perfect opportunity for that funding. Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, next we have Kim McMahon.
Greetings. Kim McMahon, 5357 Thursby, North Canton. I want you to consider moving forward to improve the response time in the southwest corner of the city. At the same time, in a spirit of compromise, I also encourage you to form a citizens advisory committee. Like myself, I'm certain that you were moved when the people spoke at the last meeting. Their stories play over and over in my mind. I'm asking that you please search your hearts and consider, at the very least, a medic satellite station in that area. It's the part of the city that's ripe for residential growth, bringing in more families to our community. And what a tragedy it would be if one of those residents or a child visiting Camp Wainoa passed because nothing was done to shorten response times, particularly when the city has the money through the Nexus settlement to do just that. 20 years ago, when the study was done proposing stations at Raber Road and Mayfair Road, followed by another in the southwest corner, it was uncertain where the money would come from. Now it's clear. I'm pleased to see Station 3 being built, and I'm certain none of us want the folks in the southwest quadrant where the majority of the people live who are nearest the pipeline have to wait another 20 years. About the Citizens or Advisory Committee, there is no guarantee that it would recommend a fire station in the southwest corner. But from what I understand, there is $4.2 million left in the settlement fund, if that's what you call it. If $3 million were set aside to pay for Station 4, that leaves about $1.2 million, and that's where the Citizens Committee comes in. Why not allow the community citizens group to make suggestions on how the remaining $1.2 million should be spent? If you decide, and again, I encourage you to do so, to place a fire or EMS station in that southwest corner, please add a deadline for construction. It would be a disaster if a life were lost because a great idea sat idle.
Thank you, Mrs. McMahon. The next person signed in to speak is Dan Reynolds. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Dan Reynolds. I am representing YMCA Camp Wainoa at 815 Mount Pleasant Road. Since 1930, YMCA Camp Wainoa has been a cornerstone of the green community. Each summer, over 1,600 children attend our day and overnight camp programs. While at camp, campers enjoy catching fish, climbing the tower, making s'mores and banana boats, swimming, paddling, and riding a horse. They also defeat the Wicked Witch, rescue the fair maiden, race to the finish, and conquer the quest. Most importantly, through these experiences, children put down their telephones, talk to their neighbors, try something new, explore nature, and have an old-fashioned face-to-face conversation around the dinner table. In addition to our summer programs, Camp Wainoa serves over 5,000 children and adults throughout the school year through our outdoor education programs, parent-child weekends, spiritual youth retreats and sports functions, and organizational retreats. Additionally, over 500 riders take part in our equestrian programs annually. Yes, many great things are happening at camp every day, and we appreciate the exceptional services provided by the City of Green for our campers and guests. Fire and EMS always respond as quickly as possible and appropriately to our emergency situations. Crispin Road and Mount Pleasant Road is always well maintained, and winter access is never an issue. The notification emails and text messages are always appropriate and timely. Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity tonight to endorse the EMS and/or fire station number 4 in the southwest corner of our city. As we all know, camp is fun, but there is some inherent risk to our activities. We work hard to mitigate this risk through safety measures and staff training, but occasionally, bad things happen. Today, bee stings and peanut butter or eggs can cause a life-threatening situation in moments. Time is critical. According to the Medical News Bulletin, the average response time nationally to EMS is 7 minutes. Longer EMS times are associated with worse outcomes in trauma patients. Currently, at Camp Wainoa, the average response time is over 10 minutes. For the safety of our community, our campers, staff, and volunteers, please keep funding for Station 4. Thank you for your time and service to our community.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. The next and last person that signed in to speak is Des Wertheimer.
Good evening, Des Wertheimer, 130 East Turkey Foot. I don't live down where these folks live in the southwest corner, but the fire station 4 is a no-brainer. Turns out Jackson has the same problem in their northwest corner we have in our southwest corner. The money we have, again, obviously, this is a no-brainer. We earmark it for a station. Maybe we need to lock the mayor and trustees from Jackson, the fire chiefs, union representatives, law directors, finance directors, whoever, and come up with a plan. Put a mutual station between the two, right at Mount Pleasant and Arlington. It can be manned by both departments. In Bath, Copley and Bath share a station on Medina Road that covers their areas and have done it now for almost 10 years. And this is done in a lot of areas. The money came from the Nexus Pipeline Agreement. There are a lot of people in this room tonight that attacked many of you for agreeing to take that money. Now, we need to remember the words that were said here and the attacks. I want some of you to go to Google Earth and look at the pipeline right of way. It's visible. I don't know, I just recently updated my iPad. For some reason, I hadn't noticed before. And take a look at Lake Township. There are 3 times the number of residents in Lake Township that are closer to the pipeline than there are in our city, of the Nexus Pipeline. 3 times. And yet, they didn't even stand up to fight. They didn't even bother to fight. And Lake didn't get anything. We got $7.5 million because the mayor and the law directors did all they could to fight this. We got this money. We're going to build Station 3. Station 4 definitely needs built. But the last $1.2 million, if that's what's needed, we need the equipment then to man these. To build Station 4, we won't have a frontline fire truck. We'll need 2 ambulances, or at least 1 ambulance from us, and that's going to cost $700,000. Plus, you're going to build a building. Plus, you're going to need to man it. So there are a lot of options here. The station needs to be built. All these residents here are not wrong. The study says it needs to be done. It's just, how do we do it? How do we do it quickly? And how do we do it the best way to benefit everyone? A full station by itself, the economics are never going to be there. But doing something with Jackson may be the best course and the quickest course to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wertheimer. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak here this evening that maybe didn't sign in? Are you sure? Okay, we'll move on with other business. The next item on our agenda is the reading of correspondence.
An email from Margaret Yeager regarding her support of Fire Station Number 4. And an email from Jeff Evans regarding his support of a fire station in the southwest quadrant of Green. And that is it.
Thank you. The next item is the reading of new legislation.
First reading resolution 2019 R23, a resolution accepting the donation of land from the Summit County Land Reutilization Corporation for the purpose of constructing Fire Station Number 3 upon completion of the demolition of this structure located at 3803 Mayfair Road, parcel 2804642, and declaring an emergency.
This will be referred to the Planning and Economic Development Committee.
Mr. President,
Mr. Yearigan.
the administration has requested first reading passage of 2019 R23. It was discussed today in committee, and Mr. Weavy explained that really this is a procedural mechanism whereby the Community Improvement Corporation initially acquired title to the land that Fire Station Number 3 will be built on. It had to transfer the land to the Summit County Land Reutilization Corporation because they do the demolition, and their rules require they need to have title to the property before they demolish, and it's in the best interest of the city to allow them to do that because otherwise the city would pay for the demolition to the tune of somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000. So by allowing that to be transferred to Summit County Land Reutilization, they flipped the bill for the demolition, and now it's time to transfer the property to the city to permit Fire Station Number 3 to be built. It really is kind of a procedural transfer, and because of that, and to allow the station to be built soon and quickly, the administration has requested first reading passage. The committee was okay with that, and so at this time, I would move to bypass committee deliberations on 2019 R23.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to bypass committee deliberations on 2019 R23. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
At this time, I make a motion to bypass the three reading rule relating to 2019 R23.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to bypass the three reading rule on 2019 R23. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Finally, I move to adopt 2019 R23 on first reading.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019 R23. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Yergin,
Yes.
Mr. Spate,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Babbitt. Sorry, Mrs. Babbitt.
Yes.
She just
I-
came back.
I kept seeing your son out there, so I was thinking Mr. Babbitt earlier. Mr. Dyer's in here. Mr. Humphrey.
Yes.
Resolution 2019.
Yes.
Oh, man. It's a long day.
It's all right. It's your first piece of legislation since you're back. We've got a lot more of these, so we'll give you a pass on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, a whole page worth of them. Okay, it was adopted 6-0.
Very good.
Okay, let me mark that past. Okay, first reading resolution 2019 R24. A resolution authorizing the city of Greene to enter into a real estate purchase agreement with Clayton C. McCune for the property located at 1364 East Turkeyfoot Lake Road, making an appropriation and declaring an emergency.
This will be referred to the Finance Committee.
First reading resolution 2019 R25. A resolution authorizing the purchase of one 2020 5-ton Kenworth T370 cab and chassis from Hisong Kenworth of Richfield for use by the city's service department and declaring an emergency.
This will be referred to the Finance Committee.
First reading resolution 2019 R26, a resolution authorizing the purchase of two 2019 F550 chassis XL 4x4 SD crew cab 1-ton dump trucks from Ganley Ford Inc. for the use of the city's service department and declaring an emergency.
This will also be referred to the Finance Committee.
First reading resolution 2019 R27, a resolution authorizing the trade-in of the 1998 sewer trailer mounted sewer SECA 747 cleaning equipment used by the city's service department to offset a portion of the purchase price of a new T-Series Ramjet sewer jet trailer and declaring an emergency.
This will be referred to the Finance Committee.
Mr. President,
Mr. Humphrey.
the administration has requested first reading passage on 2019 R27. We did have an opportunity to speak about it in committee this evening. This is purely administrative. We purchased a piece of equipment. When we passed that piece of legislation, we probably should have had at that time the credit that we were receiving from the old piece of equipment in the legislation. This cleans that up because that did not make it in that piece of legislation. And so once we pass this legislation, we will be able to receive a credit in the amount of $1,700 for that piece of equipment. We did discuss this in committee this evening. The committee was fine with proceeding on first reading passage, and so at this time, I would move to bypass committee deliberations on 2019 R27.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to bypass committee deliberations on 2019 R27. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And at this time, I move to bypass the three reading rule on 2019 R27.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to bypass the three reading rule on 2019 R27. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adopt 2019 R27.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019 R27. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Try. Mr. Humphrey,
Yes.
Mr. Yergin,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt,
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Mr. Spate.
Yes.
Resolution 2019 R27 adopted 6-0. Okay, first reading resolution 2019 R28. A resolution authorizing the purchase of three 2019 F-250 XL 4x4 SD Super Cab 3/4-ton pickup trucks from Ganley Ford Inc. for use at the City Services Department, Parks Division, and declaring an emergency.
This be referred to the Finance Committee.
First reading ordinance 2019-05, an ordinance vacating Mount Pleasant Road and declaring an emergency.
This will be referred to the Planning and Economic Development Committee.
First reading ordinance 2019-06, an ordinance creating a budget stabilization fund and declaring an emergency.
This will be referred to the Finance Committee.
First reading 2019-07, an ordinance establishing the City of Green Pipeline Settlement Fund Advisory Committee to inform City Council about ways to most effectively and efficiently spend pipeline settlement funds remaining in the Pipeline Settlement Fund and declaring an emergency.
This will be referred to the Finance Committee.
And last one, ordinance 2019-08, an ordinance to improve the emergency services in the southwest quadrant of the City of Green and to appropriate from the Pipeline Settlement Fund and declaring an emergency.
This will also be referred to the Finance Committee.
And that's it.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the report from council committees. The first committee to report this evening is the Finance Committee, chaired this evening by Mr. Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance did meet this evening. Myself, Mr. Yergin, Mrs. Babbitt were present. We did have many items of legislative business. The first was a third reading of 2019 R12 as amended. This is a resolution awarding a contract to North Star Asphalt for the 2019 resurfacing project and declaring an emergency. This is the resurfacing project for 2019. The lowest and best bid was submitted by North Star Asphalt. The base bid was $1,151,466.60. We had three alternate bids, alternate 1, alternate 2, and alternate 4. The piece of legislation in committee this evening was amended to add alternate 2. We did not have that in there last time. So the total amount of the appropriation is $1,755,339.85. This is the third reading, and so I would move to adopt 2019 R12 as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019 R12 as amended. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Humphrey,
Yes.
Mr. Yergin,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt,
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
and Mr. Spate.
Yes.
Resolution 2019 R12 adopted 6-0 as amended.
We had a number of pieces of legislation that we considered on second reading this evening. The first was a second reading of 2019 R15. This is a resolution authorizing the purchase of a Ventrac tractor from Baker Vehicle Systems Incorporated with Ballfield Groomer and Ballfield Renovator attachments for the use by the City Service Department, declaring certain service department equipment surplus property to be traded in to offset a portion of the purchase price of the Ballfield Groomer, and declaring an emergency. And so we had a presentation during committee this evening about this piece of equipment, and Mr. Yergin, as only Mr. Yergin could do, called it the Swiss Army knife of pieces of equipment. I think that was a good description, because this piece of equipment, in addition to taking care of our ball fields, will have multiple purposes and uses throughout the city. Our Parks Director gave us the information regarding that. We were shown pictures of that, and we had an opportunity to discuss it. Because the baseball season is approaching, the administration has requested second reading passage on this. The amount of the equipment after the trade-in is not to exceed $23,907.25. We're declaring as surplus a Ventrac tractor model 4227 that is beyond its useful life to the city, and the mayor is directed by this piece of legislation to sell and trade in the equipment to get a credit in the amount of $6,000 to offset the purchase price of the new piece of equipment. The committee did agree to second reading passage, and so at this time, I would move to bypass the 3 reading rule on 2019 R15.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to bypass the 3 reading rule on 2019 R15. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adopt 2019 R15.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019 R15. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Humphrey,
Yes.
Mr. Yergin,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt,
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Mr. Spate.
Yes.
Resolution 2019 R15 adopted 6-0.
The next piece of legislation we had in committee this evening was a second reading of 2019 R16. This is a resolution authorizing the City of Greene to enter into a lease agreement for the purchase of miscellaneous equipment for use at the Raintree Golf and Event Center and declaring an emergency. We did talk about this at our last meeting and also had an opportunity to discuss it this evening. Really, the options that we had, we could have purchased used equipment, in which case we would have had to front an amount around $208,000 to buy that used equipment. We were also provided an option through our partner Billy Casper Golf. Of course, they run and maintain golf courses all throughout the country, and based upon the buying power that they have and the relationships that they have, we are able to lease the new equipment over 5 years, thus reducing our maintenance cost. And as a result of doing that, we don't have to pay all of it up front. If for some reason we decide not to run the golf course any longer, we can either sell that equipment on the open market. Billy Casper Golf can use that equipment at one of their other locations, or we would have options to be able to otherwise dispose of the equipment. If we do continue to run the golf course at the end of 5 years, that equipment becomes ours. Of course, if there's still useful life left in that equipment, we will continue to use that equipment through its useful life as we would any other piece of equipment. We had an opportunity to discuss this in committee this evening, and because golf season is coming up, and Billy Casper Golf has indicated that they do need this equipment in order to begin the golf season, the committee did approve second reading passage for this piece of legislation. And so at this time, I would move to bypass the 3 reading rule on 2019 R16.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to bypass the 3 reading rule on 2019 R16. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adopt 2019 R16.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019 R16. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Humphrey,
Yes.
Mr. Yergin,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt,
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Mr. Spate.
Yes.
Resolution 2019 R16 adopted 6-0.
We had another piece of legislation on second reading, and this is the second reading of 2019 R20, a resolution awarding a contract to Melway Paving Company Incorporated for the 2019 Parks Pavement Maintenance, making an appropriation and declaring an emergency. We received a report about this in committee this evening. The lowest and best bid was submitted by Melway Paving. The base bid in the amount of $78,180.69. This will go to improve the paving at Bettler Park. We had hoped to also include Greensburg Park initially, but a number of priorities are taking precedence, and so we're going to be doing Bettler Park this year, and hopefully we'll be able to deal with Greensburg Park next year. The legislation appropriates Well, we accept the lowest and best bid of $78,180.69, and then we appropriate $26,000 to the Bettler Park paving maintenance account from the unappropriated balance of the park's capital project reserve fund. This is on second reading, and I do not believe that we're going to go forward with second reading passage on this, so the committee would request time.
Time will be granted.
The next piece of legislation we had was a second reading of 2019 R21. This is a resolution awarding a contract to Carvo Companies Incorporated for the State Route 619 in Myersville Road roundabout, reclassify as an advance, as a transfer, making an advance, making an appropriation, and declaring an emergency. Again, this is on second reading. The lowest and best bid from Carvo was in the amount of $1,687,475.90. We had a previous resolution that authorized an advance of $468,000 from the general fund to the permissive auto license tax fund. This piece of legislation approves going to the Summit County Engineers Office, which we've already actually done, to request those funds in the amount of $553,536, and it allows us to move forward with this roundabout project. As we discussed in committee this evening, this is not a project that is new on our radar. In fact, we've had many meetings here in council chambers where we announced to affected residents that they could come in and be informed about the project, see schematics about what the project would look like. And we also had many opportunities to go on site and talk to homeowners about the impact of this and potential impact of this roundabout on their property, and we discussed some of that this evening. This is a project that is going to be built in 145 calendar days. And as you know, that when we did the recent roundabout project here in the city of Greene, it took longer than that, so this will be a quicker project, which is a good thing because it's a very busy roadway. It's going to be conducted at a time when school is not in session, so it will be at a time from the time school lets out up until the time that school resumes, and within that period of time, this project will be completed, and I think it'll be a tremendous addition to the city, and we heard a report on that from our engineer this evening. Again, because this is second reading, the committee did decide to move forward on this, and so at this time, I would move to bypass the three reading rule on 2019 R21.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to bypass the three reading rule on 2019 R21. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adopt 2019 R21.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019 R21. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Humphrey,
Yes.
Mr. Yergin,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt,
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Mr. Spate.
Yes.
Resolution 2019 R21 adopted 6-0.
The next piece of legislation we had in committee this evening is related to this same project, and it's a second reading of 2019 R22. This is an emergency resolution declaring the necessity and intention to appropriate for street purposes certain fee simple interests, temporary and permanent easements in and to various premises along State Route 619 Myersville Road, altogether with the necessary appurtenances thereto, further identified as the State Route 619 Myersville Road roundabout project, and declaring an emergency. In order for this project to be built, a small piece of land needs to be appropriated from one of the homeowners. That is the purpose of this legislation. There's been negotiations between the city and the homeowner. When the city and a homeowner cannot agree on the valuation, then the city puts down into a fund a certain amount that is the amount that is determined to be fair value for that piece of property. The landowner obviously has certain rights to be able to determine whether or not they agree with that. If they don't, there's a process set forward by the Ohio Revised Code that they can seek redress from a court to see if there is a different value that that court will place on this. This piece of legislation simply moves that process forward. It doesn't impair any of the rights of the homeowner. They will have the same rights that they would have if we did not pass this legislation, but it allows us to enter the property, and if there's any utility work that needs to be done, we are able to move forward with that. We did discuss this in committee this evening. The committee did give its approval to move forward, and so at this time, I would move to bypass the 3-reading rule on 2019 R22.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to bypass the 3-reading rule on 2019 R22. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adopt 2019 R22.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019 R22. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Humphrey?
Yes.
Mr. Yergin?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt?
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy?
Yes.
Mr. Spate?
Yes.
Resolution 2019 R22 adopted 6-0.
We had one final piece of legislation that we passed on first reading, and that was a first reading of 2019 R27, which we just passed. We had no items of old or new business, and if you missed any of this, it'll be available as a pay-per-view later on if you want to go back and watch the Finance Committee meeting, and we adjourned at 5:53.
Thank you, Mr. Humphrey. We just got a lot of work done there. The next committee to report is Environment and Parks, chaired this evening by Mr. Spate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Myself, Mrs. Babbitt, and Mr. Shaughnessy were here. We did have one item of legislative business. That was 2019 R17, a resolution awarding a contract to Abbott Electric Incorporated for the Torox Center walking path lighting and declaring an emergency. This was the second reading. We talked about it in committee. Basically, it's appropriating $68,600 to award a contract to Abbott Electric, and they're going to start the phase 1 of the lighting plan for Veterans Park and the Torox Center. The first phase includes lights around the walkway on the back side of the park and the ballards in the front of the Torox Center. And we had talked about it, and we decided to go ahead and request second reading passage just to get this project started. So at this time, I move we bypass the 3-reading rule on 2019 R17.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to bypass the 3-reading rule on 2019 R17. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And at this time, I move to adopt 2019 R17.
Second.
I have a motion to adopt 2019 R17. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Spate?
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt?
Yes.
Mr. Humphrey?
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy?
Yes.
Mr. Yergin?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Resolution 2019 R17 adopted 6-0.
We had no new or old business to come before committee, and we adjourned at 6:02.
Thank you, Mr. Spate. The next committee to report is the Public Safety Committee, chaired this evening by Mrs. Babbitt.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Public Safety Committee did meet this evening. Mr. Humphrey and I were present. Mr. Dyer was absent. We had a license item before us this evening, TMP 2514, a liquor license transfer from Raintree Country Club, Inc., DBA Raintree CC, to Raintree Golf Management LLC, DBA Raintree Golf and Event Center, Golf Course and Patios and Pavilions, 4340 Mayfair Road, Uniontown, 44685. The license is a D5 and a D6. It was brought to my attention that I mischaracterized this during committee, so hopefully that will be cleared up when I properly make a motion on this liquor license. The Summit County Sheriff's Office looked into this matter for us. They've had no complaints with this location, and no comments were received from council. So at this point, I will move that we do not request a hearing on liquor license TMP 2514.
Second?
I have a motion and a second not to request a hearing on liquor license item TMP 2514. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Babbitt,
Yes.
Mr. Humphrey,
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Mr. Spate,
Yes.
Mr. Yergin,
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Okay, so we will not request a hearing on that liquor license. Our committee also received the February reports this evening from the Summit County Sheriff's Department as well as the Green Fire Department. We also received some resident testimony and input today regarding high levels of speed all over the city, as well as response times to zones located in Ward 3. And we were adjourned we had no other business, and we were adjourned at 6:11.
Thank you, Mrs. Babbitt. The next committee to meet this evening, or report, is the Planning, Community, and Economic Development, chaired by Mr. Yerrigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Myself, Mr. Spate, and yourself, Mr. Young, were present during committee. We did have a couple of items of legislation before us. One was 2019-01, an ordinance declaring a portion of improvements to a certain parcel of real property owned by Arlington Ridge Townhomes LP to be a public purpose, exempting 100% of the value of the improvements from real property taxation for 30 years, and declaring an emergency. There was some discussion about this and actually the titling of the legislation, in that it is really a tax increment financing piece of legislation where the taxes are diverted to improvement of the development, and an agreed-upon portion is paid to the school district. It doesn't really exempt 100% from taxes in the truest sense of the word. During discussion, Mr. Weathy indicated that the administration is in discussion with representatives from the school district, and they've asked us for additional time to allow that discussion to occur. And therefore, Mr. President, we're asking for additional time on 2019-01.
Time will be granted.
On third reading, there is 2019-04, an ordinance establishing public notification requirements prior to city council action, authorizing city funds, or authorizing the application for grants or other funding methods to be used for the design or construction of the master trail plan or similar long-range city development planning or portions thereof, and declaring an emergency. This piece of legislation is under further research and investigation, and therefore, Mr. President, we're asking for additional time.
Time will also be granted.
And then on first reading, we did recently just move for adoption of 2019 R23, which essentially is a piece of legislation to allow a procedural transfer of property to occur so that the fire station number 3 could be built. That was discussed earlier in today's meeting, and it was approved. There was no new or old business, and our committee adjourned at 6:26.
Thank you, Mr. Yerrigan. The next committee to meet this evening is Rules and Personnel, chaired by myself and Mr. Humphrey this evening. We had one item of legislation on third reading. 2019-03, an ordinance amending rules of the Civil Service Commission of the City of Greene and declaring an emergency. This is the third reading, like I just mentioned. This piece of legislation will assist the administration in hiring the most qualified candidates to fill job openings. In addition to that, it's a good opportunity for the city to update their civil service rules. We did discuss this. The committee or council didn't have a lot of discussion. We did talk about it mostly on second reading. So at this time, I will make a motion to adopt 2019-03.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019-03. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Humphrey,
Yes.
Mr. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Mr. Spate,
Yes.
Mr. Yergin,
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt.
Yes.
Ordinance 2019-03 adopted 6-0.
Very good. We had no other business, and we were adjourned. The next committee to report this evening is Transportation, Connectivity, and Stormwater, chaired this evening by Mr. Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Myself, Mr. Young, and Mr. Yergin were present. We had two items of legislation. The first, 2019 R18, a resolution authorizing the mayor to engage Prime AE Group Incorporated for professional planning and engineering services related to the Arlington Road Corridor Study and declaring an emergency. This is a long-range study for a 5 to 20-year plan for Arlington Road between 619 and Bettler Road. This is needed to pursue grant monies as well as prepare for future development along that stretch of road. The cost of this study is $49,900. And the city is, I'm sorry, Mr. Wheathie has asked for second reading passage on this. So at this time, I move to bypass the three reading rule for 2019 R18.
Second. I have a motion and a second to bypass the three reading rule on 2019 R18. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
At this time, I move to adopt 2019 R18.
Second. I have a motion and a second to adopt 2019 R18. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Babbitt,
Yes.
Mr. Humphrey,
Yes.
Mr. Spate,
Yes.
Mr. Yergin.
Yes.
Resolution 2019 R18 is adopted 6-0.
Our second piece of legislation is 2019 R19, an emergency resolution authorizing the mayor to accept the transfer of bridge ownership and maintenance responsibilities for bridges located in the city of Greene from Summit County to the city of Greene and declaring an emergency. This is legislation regarding 8 bridges, mostly culverts, that were on township routes when we were township. Now they're on city streets, and because they're cities, on city streets, the city is responsible for them, and no longer, it is no longer the county's responsibility. They're letting us know that they're giving them back to us to maintain and to inspect. The committee, this is on second reading, so at this time, the committee requests time.
Time will be granted.
Thank you. We had no further business, and we adjourned at 6:49.
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy. The next committee to report will be Intergovernmental and Utilities, chaired this evening by Mr. Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Myself, Mr. Spate were present. However, we had no items to discuss, so we did not meet.
Thank you. The last committee to report is a Charter Amendment Implementation Committee, chaired this evening by Mr. Yergin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Myself, Ms. Babbitt, and Mr. Shaughnessy were present. And although we had no items of legislation and did not meet, the mayor was careful to remind the public that tomorrow the Charter Review Commission will be meeting again at 7 p.m. In this chambers, and they will be discussing the issue that's probably of most interest to residents of Greene, and that is the department heads, which would include the law director discussion. So anyone who's interested in coming, I would encourage you to attend. It's open to the public, and public input will be taken.
Thank you, Mr. Yergin. That concludes our reports of committees. The next item on our agenda is the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few things in the last couple weeks. A couple weeks ago, I toured 3 of the 4 Hattie Larum facilities in the city of Greene to learn about what they do, and great facilities. They do Constant Companions Day program, a group home, and they have job skills program, including doggy daycare. So they're a great addition to our community. These programs provide those with developmental disabilities the opportunity to develop skills, serve the community, and eventually, where applicable, join the workforce. Hattie Larum began in 1960s and has grown today to serve more than 1,600 individuals in Northeast Ohio. So congratulations to all the work that they do. On Wednesday, March 20th, the engineering department was recognized for the Outstanding Highway Project Award for the 619 Pickle Road Roundabout project. So congratulations to Paul Pickett, his staff, the contractor, and all those participating in that project. Later that day, I attended a ceremony honoring KinderCare toddler teacher Denise Williams. She won a regional award from KinderCare, which has thousands of locations throughout the United States, and she received a $5,000 check for her outstanding teaching of our young students. So congratulations to Denise Williams. And that evening, I also attended the Green High School Senior Top 25 Honors Banquet, where the top 25 GPA students talk about their careers and about their favorite teacher in their, as they went through the school system. Okay, a couple miscellaneous items. City of Green has been named a Tree City USA by the Arbor Day Foundation in honor of its commitment to effective urban forest management. The City of Green will hold its 2019 Arbor Day celebration on Friday, May 3rd at 1 p.m. in conjunction with the new dog park opening located within Aris Park. The public is welcome to attend. Once again, that's 1 o'clock on May 3rd. The city has also been named a 2018 All-Star Award winner by Constant Contact. This is based on significant achievement using email newsletters to engage their customer base. In other news, the City of Green is accepting applications from not-for-profits for the 2019 Living Green Community Grant. The application deadline is Friday, April 26th at 3 p.m. For more information, visit the city's website or call Sarah Herring at 330-896-6614. And finally, under the applications, the city is still accepting applications for the Student Municipal Representative Program for grades 10 through 12. You don't have to be a Green High School student, but you have to be a resident of Green. The application deadline is Monday, April 1st. And once again, for more information, visit the city's website or contact Sarah Herring. And lastly, upcoming events. On Thursday, April 4th, you'll have an opportunity to take a walk with the mayor in honor of National Walking Day. That'll be a 12 o'clock ceremony here at Central Park. We're going to have a 1.5-mile walk around Central Park to promote walking as a heart-healthy activity. All residents, local businesses, and others are invited to join the employees of the City of Green or encouraged to get out at lunchtime that day and take a walk. And then on Saturday, April 6th, we will have Green Fire Truck Dedication Ceremony. That'll be at 10 a.m. at Fire Station Number 1. The doors open at 9:30. So City of Green will be dedicating its newest fire engine tanker. It's a 2,500-gallon pumper tanker to its fleet of safety vehicles. The ceremony will include brief remarks from Fire Chief Jeff Fenai, followed by a blessing of the truck and a traditional ceremonial wetting down of the engine. I guess you'll have to come to see it. The community families are encouraged to attend and will be asked to join in toweling dry the engine prior to Green Fire pushing the truck into the service bay as a ceremonial sign of being placed into service. Refreshments will be served following the ceremony. And then on Tuesday, April 16th, we will have the third of a series of Drug Task Force educational events. This will be entitled Beyond Drugs, Managing Chronic Pain, and this will be with Tara Scott. That, once again, will be on April 16th at 6 p.m. right here in the cab. And then on April 25th will be another Drug Task Force event. This will be called Hidden in Plain Sight. It'll be the third time in the last 5 years that we've done this event in the City of Green. Once again, April 25th at 6 p.m., and that'll be in the Central Park Community Hall. So not here, but next door in the Community Hall. And a light dinner will be served if those who are willing to come just for a free meal. But we're hoping you'll learn something about how drugs are hidden and how people are deceived by those who use drugs. And lastly, I just want to mention again, another Drug Task Force event, but on May 5th will be Crisis Awareness Sunday, where local ministers and preachers will talk about the dangers of addiction and mental health to their congregations. And so we appreciate the efforts of those in our faith-based community. Thank you, Mr. President, for that time.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Mayor. Is there any unfinished or new business? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.